Thank you. Well, thank you very, very much. I'm Joe Gary, and I am especially delighted to welcome you to Kinky Boots. Kinky Boots is an extraordinary show. You know, Rodgers and Hammerstein, who are living up in musical theater heaven, are smiling down on this show. You know, it is an old-fashioned musical. It is a musical, if you can believe this, with a storyline. It's a musical, if you can believe this, with original music written only for the show, which incidentally is extraordinary. And it sort of follows the old-fashioned idea of Rodgers and Hammerstein telling a story in a wonderful way, presenting a problem, compounding the problem, resolving the problem, all with wonderful and soaring music and extraordinary and interesting dance and interesting storylines. It really is old-fashioned in that regard. I'm not quite certain what Rodgers and Hammerstein would be thinking about the idea of a drag queen as one of the central figures in the show. But times have changed, and I'm sure if they were writing today, they would have a few drag queens in their show too. Maybe not in Sound of Music, but somewhere it might have been appropriate. In any case, it's such a delight to go back and have this kind of caring, loving musical. So let me just give you a sort of sample. In 2013, when it opened on Broadway, Matilda was the hot show, and all of the critics fell madly in love with Matilda, and it was certain that Matilda would sweep all of the Tony Awards. Well, Kinky Boots sort of danced its way into Broadway, and certainly into the hearts of everyone who saw the show. It is a very warm, loving show that creates this sense of tremendous connection with the audience. And so lo and behold, what would happen when the Tony Awards happened, there was a tremendous surprise and upset with Kinky Boots winning 6 of the major Tony Awards, including Best Musical and Best Score. And Cyndi Lauper then would become the first woman alone to win the Tony for the best score. There have been women working in partnerships, but never a woman standing alone. And Cyndi Lauper deserves every inch of that Tony Award. She's given us an extraordinary collection of music that's flashy and sassy, as you would expect from Cyndi Lauper. But then there are also wonderful and touching and introspective ballads that just pull you so deeply into the central characters that you're very taken with the world that is developed for you in this magnificent show. Okay, let me go back to the beginning. The time is 1997. The place is London. The area is Northampton. And in fact, there is a real shoe factory that's about to go into bankruptcy. As you know, small businesses suffer greatly everywhere in the world, especially small factories that develop specialty items. In this case, it was the W.L. Brooks Shoe Company, and they made basically handmade Brogan shoes for men, which were sort of going out of fashion to begin with, and then making them in the old-fashioned style was, of course, making them enormously expensive. I have to tell you, I do remember in that period, I would take theater groups to London in the 90s, and I would rush immediately to Jermyn Street, which is the main street for men's clothes in London, especially handmade clothes, and I would look at these Brogans in the window and hoping that one day they would go on sale. One day I saw them on sale for 50% off, and I still couldn't afford them. So, you know, that was never, those shoes were never meant to be in my life. But in any case, in 1997, like many small industries of that sort, they were suffering greatly and about ready to file for bankruptcy. The owner of this longtime family business died and willed the business to his son, who had really no interest in the shoe business at all. In fact, what would happen while he was trying to decide, keep in mind there was sort of a moral issue here. So this is really based on a true story. And the moral issue was the whole town really sort of revolved around the success of this factory, and generations of people had worked in this factory. So it was a very difficult task for the young son and heir to just close down the factory. It would mean the death of the town, basically. And so the end result was he received a phone call from a woman who ran a sort of fetish shoe store for cross-dressers. We're talking about drag queens. And she was looking for a company that might make boots that would hold the male body. And so she said, does this interest you? And this was the key. And this young man decided what he would do is he would change his factory instead of closing it and make boots for men dressing as women. And he was enormously successful, and he saved the factory and the town and all of the people who worked in it. There was a documentary that was made in 1999 that was called Trouble at the Top. It was done by the BBC, and it focused on this really amazing story of this very conservative shoe company that found its new niche in making Kinky boots. And it really was the BBC that gave the title Kinky Boots. The original name that they talked about it was Divine Footwear, but Kinky Boots obviously is the name. You wouldn't go and see a musical called Divine Footwear, but you would go and see a musical called Kinky Boots. So in any case, this documentary is out there now, 1999. Everyone's beguiled by this story and the curiosity of it and the idea of such different worlds coming together. People working in a factory, then meeting people who were involved in cross-dressing. The worlds couldn't have been more separate, and yet they came together in this wonderful way, and the BBC told this story brilliantly. Lo and behold, what would happen is in 2005, an English film is released called Kinky Boots, which is, of course, this story, but told sort of in a heightened form. And it is the story of the young man, Charlie, who inherits the shop, who meets the drag queen, Lola, and together they save the factory. And again, we have these two separate worlds coming together, but what makes both the movie, but especially the musical, so charming is that they learn to understand and appreciate one another and the worlds that they come from. And it makes for an extraordinary journey. All right, so the movie is released. It gets sort of mixed reviews. It plays around in the art houses. It is never, you know, first-class popular movie, but a lot of people sort of followed it and were interested in the movie. I really recommend it if you haven't seen it. It's very delightfully done. And it's really wonderful in this case to go and see a work that isn't as good as the musical. You know, we always, when we read a book, we say, is the movie going to be as good as the book? Well, in this case, the musical is much better than the movie, but nevertheless, the movie is certainly worth seeing. All right, so that's done in 2005. In 2006, enter a group of producers who would see the movie, fall in love with it, and option it for a production. First of all, let me introduce the two primary producers who were really responsible for this work. Daryl Roth, a woman who's really quite extraordinary. She has a phenomenal background as a producer. She has produced 6 Pulitzer Prize-winning plays. She has extraordinary taste. She's highly gifted. And she has a wonderful way of bringing together a group of artists to make a production work. She, in turn, then met with Hal Luftig, who is also a major first-class producer. His credits are incredible, both in New York and in England. He's won countless Tony Awards for the works he has produced. He also is an outstanding producer. So together, they put together a group of producers who would ultimately present Kinky Boots. Now, what I want to do is to take a minute and talk about the role of the producer. I mean, I think most of us know the difference between producer and director. Producer is the person who handles the business and financial and legal aspects of the show. The director, on the other hand, is the person who interprets the show. We think of the director as one of the primary artists, and in the musical theater, probably the most important artist in bringing the work together and making it work. But let me just go back to this role of the producer. Aside from raising money, aside from getting the rights, aside from issuing the contracts, the producers do many other very important things. In this case, I indicated that this is a producer-driven musical, meaning that it was the producers that literally created the musical. they decided that the movie could be translated into a Broadway musical, and they hired all of the staff to do it. If we just go back for a moment and remember in the old days with Rodgers and Hammerstein or Lerner and Loewe, it would be the artist, it would be the composer and lyricist that would come up with the idea for the musical, and then once they had developed the idea, they would seek out a producer, the appropriate or right producer to present the show. In this case, it works very differently. The whole creative thrust is driven and controlled by the producers. They are the visionaries, in this case, who decided that this transition could happen from movie to stage. So let's talk a little about how they did all this. So in 2006, they optioned the rights. And again, this is a very technical, and there are a lot of details that have to be worked out. One of the most difficult things to work out in this negotiation is what we call world rights, meaning that if you do present a musical, you then control all of the music, all of the storyline, the musical itself, the selling of the musical to television or the movies, the distribution of the musical to other countries. There's an enormous responsibility that the producer has in giving a world life to a musical. And it takes a lot of time and very careful negotiation to get all of the rights in place. Well, we're dealing with first-class artists here. They were able to do this in a very efficient way. So by the time we get to 2008, they've handled over these 2 years all the legal and financial aspects. They've started raising money. Keep in mind, they're raising money only for an idea at this point. There's no script, there's no music, there's no staff, there are no artists. It's just selling an idea. And again, they were very successful in doing that. The first person they hired is Jerry Mitchell. Jerry Mitchell is the director choreographer of this show. Now, for a moment, just let me tell you, Jerry Mitchell has worked in the musical theater for 35 years on Broadway. He started out as a dancer, he became a choreographer, and now happily he's a director choreographer. He's an artist I very deeply admire. Everything he does, he handles with tremendous integrity. He has an enormous list now of very exciting shows, from The Full Monty to Legally Blonde, to Love Never Dies, the remake, the sequel to Phantom of the Opera, which is very much maligned and is really a very, very interesting show. It is on video, and I do recommend you try and see it. But Jerry Mitchell has been extraordinary. He understands the musical theater. Number one, he's been a part of it for 35 years and working on over 50 Broadway shows, either as a dancer, dancer, choreographer, or director. He certainly is able to see into the musical. So he is a perfect choice to hire in this role, really, as the first artist who will help guide this whole project. Very quickly in 2008, they also hired Harvey Fierstein. And we know him as an eccentric, outrageous actor. Many of you may have seen him in La Cage aux Folles, but most people in Cleveland saw him as Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. So he's an actor of the musical theater of tremendous distinction. He won a Tony Award, as you remember, for Edna in Hairspray. But also Harvey Fierstein is the perfect choice to deal with this issue of creating Lola, who is the drag queen, the cross-dresser, but he's able to write her with such dimension, such insight, such sensitivity that it elevates the musical to a very high level. So again, in Harvey Fierstein's background, he was first discovered in the 1980s as a young unknown actor when he wrote this brilliant work called Torch Song Trilogy. And Torch Song Trilogy was about a young boy who didn't fit, who became a drag queen, who had to fight the entire world in the early 80s, but also his family, also his religion. It was a very compelling experience, and it was autobiographical. It was based on Harvey Fierstein's life. If you miss seeing the play, which won him a Tony Award as Best Actor and Author, It has been turned into a movie with Anne Bancroft that's very, very interesting. It's a difficult movie, it's a painful movie, but it's an enormously funny movie. But it lets you see into this world to understand that we're all simply human beings. And Harvey Fierstein is the perfect person to do this. He wrote the book for La Cage aux Folles. He brought to life Edna in Hairspray. He's just recently done a play that played in New York to very, very strong positive reviews. That was about men who cross-dressed and would spend weekends in the Catskills at a resort that was dedicated to people who did this. They were not homosexual. They were very often family men with many children who would go off for a business weekend and cross-dress in the Catskills. It got tremendous reviews. And again, it was an enormously insightful view into something that we tend to judge without taking the time to understand it. So the perfect choice as a writer for this storyline. The two men, the director and the writer, then work for 2 years developing a storyline. They still don't have a writer. It was finally decided, actually it was Jerry Mitchell who said to Harvey Fierstein, "You know Cyndi Lauper, and we've tried several other people to work out writing music for this show and not very successfully. And she seems like the perfect choice." Because keep in mind, there are 3 separate worlds that we see in this story. One, we see the world of the factory. And this is very in keeping with shows that we have seen like Billy Elliot or The Full Monty or Hands on a Hard Body, stories about working class people. But then on the other hand, because of the drag element and the character Lola and her little club of cross-dressers, then we have the world of La Cage aux Folles or Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. So we've got these worlds that we have to bring together. So we have the factory, we have Lola's world, her little drag club, and then we have this wonderful sequence near the end of the show where they go to Milan, to the sort of fashion emporium of Europe, where they show the kinky boots to the fashion world. So we have these 3 distinct worlds that have to be played out. And the theory was that Cyndi Lauper would be the perfect person to do it because, number one, she's been a rock icon for 30 years. She's had this tremendous affinity for the gay and lesbian community. She has always supported that world tremendously. She's an extraordinary woman and a wonderful artist. I always wait for the time that they do a musical about her life. I mean, imagine her life with Hulk Hogan on the musical theater stage. This makes me laugh to think about it. So in any case, this eccentric woman, Cyndi Lauper said, "I really relate to drag queens because for years people thought I was a drag queen." So it's a very interesting sense of humor that she has, that she's able to bring to the musical. Now keep in mind, bringing a pop star to the musical theater rarely works. I mean, remember just recently Sting had a tremendous failure with The Last Voyage. It closed on Broadway, even though he went into the show to try and save it. Paul Simon wrote a musical called Cape Man that was a disaster and closed very quickly. And then Bono did Spider-Man, that was one of the greatest disasters ever in the musical theater. So the end result is that pop stars have not had a good record on Broadway. But Cyndi Lauper came into this because of the tremendous trust she had both for the director and especially for the book writer, Harvey Fierstein. Harvey Fierstein said the relationship we had in the 4 years that we wrote the music was sort of like Joan Crawford and her daughter. You remember the book, Mommy Dearest. And Cyndi Lauper called Harvey Fierstein Mommy Dearest through the whole process. And he called her Christine. So in any case, Harvey Fierstein was interviewed right before the show opened, and he said, "I know people are saying this was like a Joan Crawford story, but I promise you that a clothes hanger was never used in the creation of this musical," which I thought was very funny. Okay, so in any case, they worked together, and again, Cyndi Lauper, what she brings to this, of course, is this tremendous musicianship, and she's always at the cutting edge. You can't be at the top for 30 years and not be at the cutting edge of music. So she has that ability. But she also, in the whole body of her career, wrote very interesting and soulful ballads. She was able to go very deeply into herself to write this music. However, in this case, she couldn't write music for Cyndi Lauper. She had to write music for the characters. Now, what I want you to watch for in the placement of the music, I don't want to give anything away for you, but traditionally, you know, it was Rodgers and Hammerstein who taught us that the opening number of a musical show has to really set up what the show is going to be about. So you watch Fiddler on the Roof, and we have the opening song, Tradition. You know, you watch Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, and you have Comedy Tonight. And in this case, you have a love song, basically, to Shoes. It's a very funny, very appropriate song that sets the whole framework for the whole story. But then watch very carefully how as we move into Lola's world, and we move into the world of cross-dressing and Lola's nightclub, then we have another whole introduction of sound of music so that it is like club music that Cyndi Lauper is an expert at doing. And so the end result is you establish these two worlds, the world of the factory and the world of Lola's nightclub, by the introduction of two very interesting and very pertinent and right-on songs. Watch also for the brilliant song that ends the first act. You know, the issue is always, how do you start a musical? How do you end the first act? How do you start the beginning of the second act? And how do you end the musical? Those are, how do you get the big 11 o'clock number, the big dramatic number? She hits them all brilliantly in the way the show is created. And again, it was all of the knowledge that Harvey Fierstein could bring from his years of working in musicals and on musicals. He also wrote the book for Newsies, as you remember. So he's been very closely allied with La Cage aux Folles and Newsies and Hairspray. He's been so closely allied with cutting-edge shows that have impacted the audience. So with his guidance, he was able to lead her in the right direction. I thought that the way Cyndi Lauper worked on this show, though, was really extraordinary. She would go for long walks and sing into her iPhone. And that's how she created the songs. And again, one of the most compelling and brilliant songs, I'm Not My Father's Son, which is a show-stopping number. I mean, it gave the actor his Tony Award. I mean, that number is a brilliant number. What they bring out in this show is not the obvious issues of gay versus straight. They bring out the issues of being human and wanting to connect and wanting to be respected and wanting to be loved, and the struggle we all have had winning our parents' approval. And again, in the case of mothers and daughters or fathers and sons, you know, there have been countless great dramas from O'Neill to Shakespeare to musicals written about this. And this musical really hits the nail on the head. When Cyndi Lauper writes, I'm Not My Father's Son, it's the show-stopping number in the second act, and it's something we all relate to. I mean, we don't have to be Lola struggling with her sexual identity. It's about wanting to win the respect of her father. And it's enormously powerful. And it's what draws people into this show. And then, of course, there's the climactic number. So be very conscious of the development of songs, the right song for the right character. Charlie has a series of soliloquy songs where we get to know who Charlie is, the young boy who inherits the factory. Lola has a series of very insightful songs that let us into her world, so we don't see her superficially you know, as a simple drag, but we move much more deeply into who this person is and what she had to do to live the life she wanted to live. So it becomes enormously compelling the way the whole story is told. And then you add to this, I mean, the producers were so smart, they then hired David Rockwell, who is the designer of the show. And David Rockwell, if you follow architecture, is at the forefront of architecture in the world. He designs famous restaurants everywhere in the world. He designs lobbies of airports. He designs major art buildings. He's an extraordinary architect, but also he's had an enormous career as a scene designer, and he brings all those architectural talents he has to the scene design. What I want you to especially watch here is how they use the sort of factory idiom in all three worlds, in the world of Lola and the nightclub and in the world of Milan. You know, we have this in a factory, people are working and there's a line where, you know, they keep passing things down and they go on treadmills and people pass on the product as it's being developed. Someone works on one part of the sole and they pass it to the next person who adds to the heel. This sort of construction line idea. Watch how they use that mechanism in the show, and it's the basis for all the big dance numbers. It really comes together at the end of the first act, so especially watch for that. As you see the factory sort of become the mecca for this enormous production number, and the idea of this sort of moving treadmill that will become the major vehicle for the dance that's used. It took 9 months to work this out, to make certain that it was safe for the dancers, that they could control the mechanical mechanism of it. But what it is a show-stopping number that ends the first act. So all of these talents coming together are really the product of what the producers did. The other thing I want you to be aware of, this show went into previews in Chicago. And I want to pause and make 2 points about that. It played very successfully in Chicago, but the reason it opened in Chicago is Illinois created a tax relief idea for a new production trying out in that state. With Playhouse Square and its phenomenal facility, I hope Playhouse Square listens to that story to find tax abatements for developing new shows. I mean, we've done it certainly in film, and it's very appropriate with the power that Playhouse Square has. Keep in mind, it has the largest subscriber base in the entire country, beating Los Angeles, Chicago. It's extraordinary. And so now if we had these tax abatements so that new shows would preview here, we could become the new Boston of the theater world. But that is all to come. But in any case, the reason it opened in Illinois was because of this tax abatement and special liberties that were given to the show. There was a period of 6 months from that period, and this is where the producers really work, because this is when they have to decide what's wrong with the show. All of this can only happen to connect with you, the audience. And the audience tells us more about the show than any expert we bring in, than anyone, you know, who comes to give advice about the show. It's the audience who lets us know what's working and not working. And so they took this 6 months period after it played in Chicago. They cut out several songs. They added a new song for Charlie. They worked very significantly on the book to bring out the detail of the life of the people in the story, so that by the time it opened on Broadway, it became the mega hit that it did. But all of this goes sort of unnoticed. We're not aware of what the producer does. And then, of course, the last final thing, it was really the producers who picked that brilliant graphic. I mean, you know, we see that graphic of the red glitzy boot, and you know, there's a song in the show called Sex is in the Heel, and that's true. All ladies already know that. It's the men who've never known this story. And so the end result is that the graphic for the show is so compelling, it jumps right out at you. It is very rare that we have a graphic that's so strong and so identifiable. The moment you see that boot, you immediately know we're thinking of Kinky boots. And so in that regard, you're in for a great treat. You're going to see a lot of Kinky boots tonight, and I think your biggest wish when you go home is to have a pair of your own. So enjoy. Thank you very much.